All right, so I've got this simple store that we had built in the past. I've got that up and running. I've got the Rails server going. I should be able to reload the page, and yeah, it's working. So it's been a while since we were working with this particular project. Just remember, it's basically a list of products. They're categorized. So if you remember, we made that controller, which was a store controller, which is our sort of our route, and it's listing categories and then the products within those categories. So we have food and then a number of products, machines and then one product, and paper and another product. We want to add a couple things. I'd like in this menu for there to be a new link that says search. Instead of making it so that I have, say, like a search available on all pages, I'll just keep things simple and have a separate page just for search. So there'll be a link there. When I click on it, I would like to be taken to a page that has a very simple form with a single text input inside of it and a submit button. And when I click on that button, the text from the text area or the text input should be used to search through our products. Initially, we'll do it by product name, and I guess what we'll do is we'll try to make it match with wildcards. So if I searched for the full word goat cheese, it would find just this product. But if I search for cheese, it should find both cow cheese and goat cheese. That's our goal for today. So if we look at some of the files that exist here, and I'm also just going to check to see where we are at Git-wise. So I made a few changes here, but I think those are, for the most part, just the changes I made for Rubocop at the beginning. So yeah, that's not really a big deal in any of those cases, but I'll commit it. But I'll remove that Rubocop. Yeah, okay. Git add, git commit. Fixed up some white space issues. Okay, so let's look at some of what we have here. I'll open up the product model because we'll look at that in a bit. The store controllers where we're going to do most of our work. We're going to need a few new views, and we're also going to want to edit this header partial because that's where we're going to add our link to the search. And so here's where we're going to create a couple more views in here. So if we look at the controller right now, it's fairly simple. Oh, the other file I want to have open is my routing file. So right now I have a single action inside of the store controller, and all it does is just load up all of our categories. And inside of the index view, it's going to loop through those categories and render the products that are associated with the categories. I need two new actions. I want to have one action called search, and this is going to be the action that displays a search form. And I want a second action called search results, which hopefully unsurprisingly displays search results submitted when you submit this form, basically. So two different actions. That means I need two new routes for these actions. And so I will make them initially both get. So I will say a get to /search should trigger the store controller search action, and I'll give it a name. So I'll say as search, and a get request to the search results URL should load up the store search results action, and I will also give that a name of search results. By giving it a name, I could use these routes with underscore path throughout my view. So if I want to link to, for example, this page here, I can link to the search underscore path. So I need views for both of those. So in my app views store folder, I'm going to create two new files. One's going to be called search.html.erb. So plain old ERB code, no HAML this time. Oh, thank you. Search good. There we are. And here, this is going to be the search results.html.erb. Yes. And I will open those up. So just to have something in these files, initially I will just put search form will go here. And here I'll say something like search results will go here. So I just want to test out my routes, basically. I should be able to go to /search. Search form will go here, that's good. And results will go here, also good. Okay, let's start by adding a link to the search in the header. The header currently has 3 LIs. I'll add another one, and inside of it I will echo out a link to, with the link text reading search, and that's going to go to the route we created, which we named search. So we'll link to the search underscore path to get that going. So now on my store, I can go home and I can go search, and eventually a form will go there. Pretty good, good to go. I can close this down. I won't need that view anymore. I think the routes will probably be, I can put them away for a bit. Okay, the action itself is for the search is going to remain empty. We don't really need anything instantiated, so it doesn't even really need to exist. I could just have the view, although I just like having the action just so that when someone comes and looks at this controller, they'll see that a search action actually exists, even though it doesn't need to have any code associated with it. Here is where we're going to build out the search form, and for that there's a couple resources we can make use of. There is our notes, like the Rails overview notes, for a bit more complex form. I talk about using select dropdowns with form tags, so we'll talk about that at the end of today's lecture, about adding a drop-down menu to your search to search within categories. But there's also a whole Rails guide, an entire Rails guide devoted to form helpers. So if you look here, there's a Rails guide called Action View Form Helpers. And it's a whole guide just about building forms, both with Form 4 and Form Tag. So if you think back to Form 4, that's what we used for things like forms that had to do with creating or editing active record objects. And the form was actually for a particular object that was an active record object. And in the case of a search, it's not for any one product or category. So we're going to use a more generic tag called form tag. So I'm just going to copy this out of the Rails guide. The first part of the Rails guide actually goes over building a generic search form, which is exactly what we want. So that's cool. And so in my view here, I'll initially just put in an ERB, which has an echo as part of it, because we want this form to actually end up inside of our view. Form tag, do, end. So visually, this won't add anything, but if we view source, we should be able to see something. So here's the page, but if we view source, you can see that that page now contains a form. The form has an action, which is the same as the search page itself. So when we don't specify where we want something to post to, it's going to just assume the URL that we're already at. We're going to need to change that because we want it to post to the search results. And the method right now is post, but we actually set up a route for a get. And so we're going to make that as a modification as well. And so to get it,
modify the other one as post, like in the routes.
I'm going to leave it in the routes. So as the routes, I'm going to leave it as a get. The reason I'm doing the search as a get request rather than a post is that now with a get request, search results are bookmarkable, right? So someone can actually end up bookmarking a search and return to it at a later date or share that search online or whatnot. Whereas if it was posted, then you couldn't bookmark it because the post data is not visible in the URL, whereas it is with a get. So that's why I have it as a get. In my search form, I want it to go to a particular path, and the path that I want it to go to is the search results path. That's the one I set up here. So I'll say form tag, first argument is where I want it to post to. So this is the search results path. And the second argument, I want to define that the method to be used is actually a get. So I should be able to go back now to my form, reload it. The action is now correctly set to search results, and the method is correctly set to get. So that's good. When we used form 4, we had this block parameter f that we got access to, and then we built the rest of our form based on this f builder, so f.textArea or f.text field. We don't have that with form tag. Instead, we just have a bunch of underscore tag helpers that we can use. So if I want to have a text field, I will say text field tag, and I'm going to give it the name user, or like search keywords. Search keywords. And if we go back to our form in sort of view source mode, we'll see now that I have an input of type text, where both the ID and the name are set to search keywords. So that's good. I can make a submit button as well with a submit tag. And I will give it button text of search, so that when we view it like this, this is what our search is going to look like. We've got our input where we can search for things. This is where we search. And then a button to submit the search. When I submit the search, although it won't actually do anything, it should take me to the search results page. And so clicking on it, I do go to the search results page. It still says sort of hard-coded results will go here. But notice that my search ended up in the URL. This is what I mean about it being bookmarkable. Spaces have been removed and replaced by pluses, which is sort of standard fare for how a browser deals with spaces encoded into URLs. And we'll see that this is the same thing that Google, for example, does. So if I search for Wally Glutton, you can see their URL is a little cleaner, but again, it's still very bookmarkable. They've got the query right there in the URL, just like we have in our URL. Our URL gets a little bit polluted with some of the extra stuff that Rails includes in the form. So if we look at the form that Rails built, remember there's always that hidden input for dealing with UTF-8 encoding, and so that's ending up inside of our URL. And so is the idea that the button actually gets submitted as a key value pair commit equals search. But that's okay. What we would like now is for there actually to be search results displayed on the search results page. And so right now the search results page is like this. It's nothing. We do happen to have a partial that we can use to display results based on an array of products. If we go look at how we've used this, for example, in the index, we render the partial found in the products folder called product on a particular collection, so on a particular array of products. And then we had that locals where we would either show administrative links or not. And so I'm going to use this same thing inside of my search results. Like so. And I'm going to have my collection just be called, for example, maybe found products. And initially, just to test this out, in my search results, I could just say found products equals product.all. So no matter what we search for, we should see all products appearing in the search results page. And so we find them here, found products, and we display them here by rendering a partial. So back to our app, go to the search page. Here's where eventually I would like to search for like cow cheese or goat cheese. But right now, this is actually going to show like all of my products. Okay, that works. We're happy with that. How do we actually go about implementing the search? Well, that's going to happen. First, I'm going to implement it in the controller, and then I'm going to move some of the logic into the model. So first, I'll be sort of messing with the controller, and then I'll simplify things by moving this logic into the model where it actually belongs. So one thing we might want to know is where the data that the user is submitting is ending up. We know from our work with form 4 that it ends up inside of a params hash, but where in the params hash do we need to look to find this particular information? We have a text field tag that we've said should be for search keywords. And if we look at the view source, we'll see that that was used for both the name and the ID. If in the search results at the top of the page here, I do a echo on debug params, I should be able to see where in params my search keywords are ending up. So if I go back over to my project and I search again, and here I search for, again, cow cheese. Here is that debug. Debug is a wonderful little helper which basically just gives you a human readable version of the structure you're looking at, and it can be even a heavily nested structure, and it'll show you sort of the hierarchy of where things are nested. And so the params hash, directly in the params hash, we can index in on search keywords. This is a little different than form 4 where all of our data was always nested. So if we had a form for a product, we would find the title, for example, at position products and then a position title, so nested. But with form tag, it's just directly on params. So okay, let's see if that makes sense. Where it says search results here, I might say something like for, and then in quotes, I might echo params at position search keywords. So that's where it's supposed to be. So going back to this page, I should be able to just refresh the page. That's another nice part about having it in the URL. My search can just be re-triggered by refreshing this page. Search results for cow cheese. That's good. Okay, now let's get the actual search going. So in the search controller here, I might say something like keywords equals, and I'll use params at search keywords. Don't necessarily need an extra variable, but sometimes I like to make them. So here is a keywords variable. I'll initially sort of implement this incorrectly. So I'll say something like where product, what does a product look like again? Let me just quickly look at my schema in the DB folder. Does it have a name or a title? It has a title, okay. So I might say where title matches these keywords. So now my found products is not going to be all of them. It's only going to be products that have exact match on the title. Much too specific, but that's okay. It'll at least prove that things are coming along. So if I go to search and I go to cow cheese, we see cow cheese, which is good. But if I went to search and I searched for just cheese, we would see nothing. So my search is too specific. I might also want a message displayed when nothing is found. So over on the search results here, I might have something to the effect of, if found underscore products is empty, then no results found. It's a very simple message. No results found. Okay. To make this less specific, I'm going to, instead of doing this key value pair of a where clause, I'm going to encode a sort of the portion of the where clause that I would have written were I writing SQL. And again, I'm going to do it sort of incorrectly, and then we'll fix it up later. So let's see. So to replicate what I had before, it would be something like title equals, and then I'll interpolate in keywords. And I need those inside of single quotes because they're a string. I'll show you what happens without the quotes first because it's sort of a common error. Keywords, here it is without the quotes. And so if I try to rerun this search, I get a SQL error, and the reason is that I don't have this inside of a quote. Right? I need my strings to be quoted inside of my SQL, so I need to add those quotes here. So now I'm going to be generating a string where the keywords are going to end up single quoted inside of this portion of my where clause. Rerun this. And again, it should work though if I do a very specific cow cheese search. To make it more flexible, I'll change the equals to a like. And the nice thing about likes in SQL are that they allow you to use wildcards, and the wildcard character for SQL is a %sign. So if I put a % on either side of the keyword, it basically means, if this keyword appears anywhere in the title, then it's a valid result. So now I should get the ability to still get cow cheese when I search for it. But when I search for just cheese, I should get both goat cheese and cow cheese. So that's good. By doing this, I've opened myself up to attack in the sense of security. There is a fairly large security hole now in my system because I'm allowing end users to directly type something into a form, and that form data is ending up directly inside of a string, which is going into SQL, which is sort of a bad idea. So you could imagine if someone submitted a search that looked like a quote, a semicolon, and then the word like drop table products, semicolon, dash dash. Dash dash is the comment syntax for SQL. So if that ended up inside of here, like something like this, you'd have one SQL statement which is being ended with a proper quote at the end of that string from the quote that this user supplied. So this is an imagined query that someone has submitted to our system. And then directly after, we've got this drop table statement, and then after that we just comment out everything else. And so if I don't want to do this, but I know in previous versions of Rails, I don't know how Rails 4 deals with this, but in previous versions of Rails, if I submitted this, I would actually lose my products table. It would be gone. And so maybe we'll try that at the end of the lecture once I've got everything actually properly working. We'll see if that's still a vulnerability. But for now, we need to fix this. So this is bad. User data getting directly into our SQL string. How do we fix it? Well, Rails has this ability to do parameterized clauses where you put in a question mark where you actually want some data to go. And then after, as a second argument, you provide what that question mark should actually be. And so in our case, it should actually be the keywords with wildcards on either side of them. So I can add those here if I wanted to. I could say percent plus percent. So I've added my wildcards on either side. And so this is keywords. And you'll notice this time I don't need to add the single quotes. Rails is going to add them for me. So it's going to detect that this is a string, and so it's going to single quote it and put it in place. And it's also going to properly escape things that could potentially lead to SQL injection. So it'll protect me from SQL injection now by using this question mark, whereas before it would not. So my search should still work as it did before. And so cheese gets me my 2. Notice also that it's not case sensitive, which is nice. The like clause in SQL is by default not case sensitive. So by looking for lowercase cheese, we were able to find uppercase cheese. That's good. And so, yeah, that's fixed now. We could make our search sort of even more flexible. Maybe instead of just searching for the title, we also searched within the description. And so we could add something like, or description like question mark. And here I will provide keywords twice. Write this for a second. And so when you have a parameterized search like this and you have multiple question marks, then you just provide multiple variables for what should go into those question marks. In our case, it's the same thing. We're looking for the keywords either in the title or in the description. And so now if I search for the word made, for example, goat cheese has the word made in the description. Made, everything else is not present. If I search for something like the letter E, for example, I would get most of my products. So there's probably be E somewhere in the title or description of all of my products. Okay, so here we have this stuff which looks a lot like business logic or database specific stuff, and it's sitting right in our controller, which is not really nice. Our controllers should be short and readable, and they shouldn't really contain any database specific stuff. The database specific stuff should go into the model. What would be nicer to see here would be something like found products equals product dot keyword search keywords, or even just directly taking in my params at position search keywords. That I think would be, that one line would be a nice replacement for all of this. I think our intention with this code is much more clear now. Someone quickly scanning our controller can see, okay, what's happening in the search results? Oh, we've got found products, which are the product of a keyword search using the product model based on the params that are being returned at position search keywords. It's very clear, it's very short. There are a lot of people in the Ruby community that will tell you that you shouldn't create methods that are longer than 4 or 5 lines. And that goes for not just Rails, but programming in general. It's a very interesting rule to try to follow. Sandy Metz, who is a Ruby programmer, sort of elaborates further and says that not only should you have methods that are no longer than 4 or 5 lines, you should never have a class that's longer than 100 lines. And if you can code with those restrictions, you'll end up having classes that do one thing and do them well, and then very well named, very targeted methods that also do sort of one thing and do them well. It's sort of hard to do if you're used to coding up fairly long methods that do a lot, but it will actually make your code better in any programming language. So it's something to think about. And it also, if you think about, a controller, it would be nice if our controllers were, maybe just 1 line long each, so you could quickly look at a controller file and get a good idea for what that controller's doing in all respects. So how do we actually make this keyword search be part of the product class? Well, here's the product class. We can add methods to the product class, but if I add a plain old method, like this, if I said keyword search, this is adding a method to objects of type product, which is not what we want. We don't want to first have to instantiate a product just to be able to search. So we're going to add it as a class level method, which is when we do self dot. So define self dot keyword search. That's now going to add the method on the class, giving us the ability to do capital P product dot keyword search. It's going to take in a single parameter, which these are our keywords. And then that code that I copy and pasted from before, basically I will take keywords and overwrite them so that they now have, so take in keywords, but then make keywords equal to what was in keywords with wildcards on either side. I don't need an instance variable anymore. I can, oops, close that. Will you let me close this? There you go. And now I have a nice little class level method. You're not going to let me hide my mini map, are you? No. Okay, weird. But nonetheless, there it is. It's going to return products, where, and then again, I'm still doing the same where clause with an or in it, providing 2 keywords. So the business logic is now present in my model where it belongs. The controller is nice and simple. There are quite a few Rails programmers that will tell you that you never even want to do this. You never want to have any active record methods at all being called from your controller. Everything should go through some kind of either a custom method, like class level method that you've built into active record or into an active record inherited class, or using what are called scopes, which Rails gives you the ability to define rules for scopes, and then scopes become like class level methods on your products. The reason why people will argue against having any sort of active record-y stuff in your controllers is mainly because a lot of people were bitten in the transition from Rails 2 to Rails 3, where how active record worked was completely changed. And because they had all this controller code that talked directly to all active record models that no longer existed, that they had to go and rework like all of their controllers, which on a large project would be a lot of work. Had they been using methods that were added by themselves to active record inherited objects, that wouldn't have been a problem. They would have only had to go and make those modifications in the active record objects, but not in the controllers. So it would have isolated the scope of change. So I'm breaking that rule here by having an order, but I think that's okay. So this should still work as it did before. There should be no different from a user perspective, no difference from a user perspective now. So if I go back over here, and again, cow cheese should get me cow cheese, and cheese should get me both goat cheese and cow cheese. That's wonderful. And I've simplified my controller to a single line, and I've isolated that extra logic inside of a class level method on my product. So I'm going to add this on Git here. So Git add git commit -m, added a simple keyword search on the store controller with associated views and routes, and push that up to GitHub like that. Okay, that's good. Let's see if I can break. Let's see if I can break my store. Let's see if I did this as a more sort of naive implementation of product.where. And let's just say it was where title like, and let's say here I directly interpolated in keywords. And this will now need single quotes around it. I won't bother with the extra description, but so this should still work. Cheese still works. Let's try to cleverly craft. So I know this is being injected into here. Even if someone didn't see our code, they could guess that it's likely either going to be going into a single quoted string or a double quoted string. So they might, try out. Let's close the string. Let's put a semicolon to close that statement. Then let's run drop table products, just assuming that, there's a products table, usually a pretty good assumption on an e-commerce store. Close that, comment out the rest of it. In previous versions of Rails, this would have dropped the table. I don't know. Let's see what happens in Rails 4, if there's any extra protection that Rails 4 might give us. Good. So Rails 4 does not actually let this happen. Maybe. It's saying there's a syntax error. Let's see. Yeah, good. Okay, so that's nice. It actually didn't drop it for us. So there must be some extra protection by way of this. Nicely done, Rails. Select count from products where title like this, and then it closes it up, gets a semicolon, and then we have this as the rest of it. But it did not actually delete or drop our table, which is nice. I'm glad that there appears to be some extra protection. Although this might just be a SQLite thing. If we maybe transition to MySQL or Postgres, this might not be the case. We might actually still be vulnerable. So it's always better to be safe and to include the parameterized searching so that the keywords that are being placed in there are going to be pre-processed by Rails. So for example, now that I've gone and put it back to the protected way, if I now tried to submit this, it just tells me that there's no search results for that particular thing. So the data gets through, but it's not even generating a SQL error anymore. It's just saying, okay, I'm trying to find a title of a product that happened to look like this weird long string, but it's not breaking our database in any way.
It's essentially playing stupid and being like,
yeah, can't find this weirdly named product that you're trying to look for. So that's what we want it to do, right? So that's awesome, and I think that's all I wanted to show you today. And so this little refactor of going from that business logic to sort of a single class level, this is the idea that Rails projects, the controllers end up growing and growing and growing, and sometimes you end up with really, really sort of overblown controllers. So the Rails sort of mantra for that was work towards fat models and skinny controllers. And so moving your logic into your model. All that really happened with that transition. It does make the controllers more clear. In really large Rails projects, you end up just having crazy bloated models with all sorts of logic in them. And so there are a number of strategies to deal with that. You can actually have, you can create, usually the best strategy to deal with a bloated object is to create more objects. So that's often what people will do. They'll have the active record, inherited product, and then they might have a number of other objects that do things, product related things. Okay, anyone have any questions on anything I did today?
If you're operating in a production environment, you're not going to get the same error messages if you attempt to.
That is correct. So if we were operating in production mode, let's do that. Let's do that. So let's exit out here. Come on. Okay. I can't remember if in Windows I can just do this. Rails env equals production Rails server. No, that's how I do it in Linux. Let's see, Rails production server Windows. I don't want to deploy specifically, I just want to do Rails S. Minus E production, okay. Rails S minus E production. So now it says starting in production, so that's good. We're up in production mode. Production mode, you'll have a faster response throughout the website, but certain things will be cached. So if you make changes to views and then you go back to your website, the changes won't actually be there. And so that's why in development mode, it's a bit slower because it's always retrieving every page. Okay, so here I'll go back and I'll go back to where I had the broken keywords, and we'll go and test out how it's going to respond to that by just going over here. And so previously this caused a SQL exception. Now you just get this generic message. We're sorry, but something went wrong. If you're the application owner, check the logs. This is, I think, the result of a 500 error being thrown on the back end. And so here, yeah, 500 internal server error. So yeah, 500 is the HTTP status code that your web app should throw when there's a server-side error. So something on the server went wrong, which is what happened here. Could not find table products. Oh wow, did it actually work? Like, did I actually drop the table? I did. So in production mode, I was actually able to drop the table when I had the unsafe interpolated data. Wow. Okay, so there is no extra protection in Rails 4. You always have to have parameterized searching. Otherwise, like that, you'll see that my SQL injection attempt actually worked and I dropped my products table.
Huh.
Interesting. It's very fascinating that that didn't happen in development mode, but did in production mode. Wow. Okay, I think that's where I'll stop the screencast.
That's really interesting, because I would